Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of On Air with your host Owen. Funny one today because I'm here at the home of Exeter Chiefs Rugby, Sandy Park. I have a very unique opportunity to interview Rob Baxter, the director of Rugby, the man who has led Exeter Chiefs to a European title, Premiership titles, and also to 6 finals consecutively over the last 6 years. New stadium and stand at the stadium is being built, so you might hear some diggers in the background. So if you hear that noise, apologies, but just shows that we're in a really exciting place moving forward and the club is moving in the right direction. Rob is going to be discussing with me today some ideas around leadership, around how you build sustained success over such a long period of time, and the philosophies that he takes into running the club at such a high level. Rob, thank you for joining us today. Really good to be talking to you and meet you for the first time as well. I've got a few questions I'd like to ask and really just trying to pick your brains around leadership and high performance and how do you sustain that level of performance through a long season and over many seasons. I'm keen to just check back in on last season though, firstly, before we move through to this season and think about how do you manage to rebuild confidence and levels of motivation going into a new season off the back of a disappointing finals loss at the end of last year?
I don't think we need to rebuild confidence in this group because obviously most of them majority of them played the year before and won a double. You win the Heineken Cup, you win the Premiership. I'm not sure it's like rebuilding confidence, but I think what you have to be is very open about it. There were numerous things that happened in the final and in the weeks running into the final that we've already discussed and been open about. And I think when you discuss those things and you pick them out, what you'll get from a kind of a good group of guys is they'll go, well, we have made mistakes there, and that's in a way that's an automatic confidence builder because we lost the game by 2 points in the end. There were times in that game when it felt like we could really take control and we didn't. And I think you show those moments and you show where we made mistakes, and what it allows the group to see that there are improvements in performance they know they can make. That in itself should hold on to confidence, and then beyond that, of course, the other thing that should always add, or you've always got to try and make sure, I'm not saying whether confidence is the best thing, but you've got to make sure that experience counts for something. And I don't necessarily mean that needs to account to add confidence, but it needs to count for something, it needs to count to make sure you don't make the same mistakes twice. So for us probably, and I know that you might ask that in a second, we got ourselves into a little bit of a habit of just about doing enough, almost holding a team at arm's length. And it started to become a habit that nearly hurt us before the end of the season, actually did hurt us in the last game. And those kind of things were probably the biggest learns for us. And in reality, I don't mind saying it, I think if we'd have just sneaked that game in the end, we probably wouldn't have been in a position to learn them as well as we've got to learn them now. So ultimately, you've got to use that game as the chance to take another step forward. I know it's a chance to win a trophy lost, but you've always got to look bigger picture, longer term. What can we use from that result, from that performance, from the learns and the experience from it to become better as individuals and collectively?
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because we can look at the one individual game as the defining moment for people, but that bigger picture, and sometimes you learn more and move forwards more from a hit and a failure and a loss than you do from winning, and maybe don't take the learnings away. It's a long season. I'd imagine that one of the biggest challenges for you as a leader is keeping levels of motivation high throughout a long season. Managing those dips and those high points and not letting people get too carried away or too down if there's a loss or two through the season, and also doing that across a lot of different personalities, across a lot of guys. What's the trick to that? What kind of things do you consider when you're managing that motivation levels, and who else is it in the club that helps you contribute to that?
I think actually what you said is something that we've worked very hard on, and I know I personally have worked very hard on ever since I had the job, and when you talked about the highs and lows, I've always talked to the lads and the members of staff about, you've got to avoid creating a roller coaster. When I say a roller coaster of emotions, because emotion is the big energy giver or remover in a group, not the physical side of it. You can kind of manage with just monitoring, meters and collisions and minutes on the pitch. That physical emotion, which is a bigger energy sapper or a bigger energy giver, you kind of can avoid that by, you say, avoiding the emotional roller coaster. So when you have a win, you can enjoy it and you celebrate it and you make sure you celebrate that moment, and it's important. That creates a nice camaraderie, but you don't go over the top with it. And then likewise, if you lose the next week, you can't act like it's the end of the world because the difference between the two is probably, in most high performance environments is relatively small. You know, you can, as I said, you know, we lost the final by 2 points. If we won that final by 2 points, we'd have been celebrating for 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
We lost it by 2 points, and you know, I was miserable for 3 weeks.
I can imagine.
And that's the kind of difference.
Yeah.
But actually, the level in performance on the day, although you know, I would look back and say we were probably well below where I'd expect us to be.
Yeah.
That little bit of difference creates the difference in your emotional feeling. So you as kind of leaders have got to avoid thinking it's brilliant when you win, it's awful when you lose, and also that avoids you reacting by saying, right, we've got to change everything. We lost, we've got to change everything. And then we won. Look, everything's perfect, because the two are never right, are they? It's never all wrong when you lose. It's never all great when you win. And so you talk about avoiding the emotional roller coaster. That stops you fatiguing yourself unnecessarily. And then a lot of the other things we do are quite the basic things that I think most common sense people would drop on you. We try and set a bit of a theme for the season.
Yep.
So something that we can go back on. A big one we used a few seasons ago was, obviously because it was a hit TV film, was The Greatest Show. And you think of all the things you can align around that. Obviously you've got a very good quality soundtrack that you can use for emotional clips and montage music and showing the lads playing well or scoring tries. So you can take the music part of it, you can take the individual part of it, that it's a group of people made up of all shapes and sizes, and you can celebrate that with your team, and you can align it to a lot of things you do. And then within that season, you can kind of create like some social events and everything based around what your theme is. But within that season then, if you can break it down into smaller sections, so we tend to break the season down to 3 or 4 game sections with some kind of a reward at the end of that. So we set ourselves a goal on points collected, or whether we want to qualify for a tournament, whatever it kind of be in those 4 or 5 games, with some kind of a reward structure at the end. And obviously making sure it's relatively attainable, it fits in with our bigger goals. And so it's just breaking things down. And you know, we tend to make sure the guys, even though we've had all kinds of arrangement around Christmas, we'll always try and make sure there's a genuine bit of family time at Christmas for everybody. We also try and, through the season, try and get everybody, even though we don't have to, a week's holiday somewhere. We have to rotate it between everybody and who can get it, but you try and fit it in. So there's all the kind of things that you can try and do to keep it fresh. But I do think the big thing is trying to create an enjoyable work environment as well. You know, the games are the end point. The game should be the enjoyable part of the week for the player. That's why they're rugby players. But actually, the thing that will enliven them the most, or keep them ambitious and keep them energised, will be the training week. And so making sure that we do that well, and this is the key. The key is not necessarily, I think a lot of people think you've got to put variety and change and new things in there. You can do that a little bit, but in a sporting context, you know, and anybody who listens to the Olympians talking, they're not, an Olympian doesn't go, oh, I just did something different today for the sake of it, because that doesn't help them win a gold medal. But what you can do is you can talk a lot and educate your players for them to have an understanding that there are bits and pieces, there are fundamentals in a week you have to get done to be a high performer, and try and embrace those and enjoy them and relish them and change your attitude towards them, so you don't become tired of them. They become the thing you do. They become part of your everyday. They become something you enjoy and you challenge yourself with. And that's a little bit just of a mental shift. So there's all kinds of things you can do, but I think if someone said to me, what is the key? The key is engaging with your players or your work staff so that the fundamentals, the basics, the boring bits, so to speak, you approach them in a different way. You approach them as the thing that gives you the reward at the end of the week. And so they are the steps, and then you get the reward, and that reward can be weekly, you know, or monthly, or yearly, or seasonally. And I think that's the key. The key is don't try and create something false that won't win anything, just so people will enjoy it. You actually have to change your mindset a little bit, and it's that balance of the two that's the key. It's not missing the fundamentals, but at the same time not ramming it home so hard that it becomes like you're a slave to it. It's changing your mental approach to the tough bits.
It's really interesting, because you talk about, we think about pre-season and we think of, you know, sports people out there, you know, doing laps and getting fit and all that sort of stuff. And what we don't think about is leaders, coaches, and people who are in charge of making sure the performance is right, and the planning that goes into that. And it's not just about rugby; it's about environment and even the theme thing that you came up with. How much thought and planning goes into that in a season?
A lot. Sometimes we've adjusted it through a season. If a season's going a bit flat, We may introduce something else, a fair bit of it. We like to involve the players as much as possible because it just gives them a little bit of ownership. Probably something that even the group we've got now needs to do is probably learn how to take ownership of that a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because, you know, our group of lads are no different to any group of lads all over the world. We actually need to spend some time with them and educate them and talk to them a little bit about how, if we gave them a room with them all sat in there and we said, right, think about what qualities you want to show as a team, what your genuine goals and aims are for this season. You know, it's too easy just to go, well, we want to win Europe and we want to win the Premiership. It's more about, well, what are the key elements, how you want to be seen, how you want to practice, how you want to train, that make those things a reality. Yeah. You'd be amazed how if you just said it to 2 or 3 guys and said, go in that room with 40 players, it would be almost impossible for them to do it. Yeah. So you need to actually guide them in a certain way of, look at these things, look at what other sports have done, look at the examples of these other, as you say, these other leaders, look at the themes these other clubs have used or other teams have used, so that they can start to think for themselves a bit about it. Because the last thing, the worst thing in the world is to say, right, we want to involve you in this, give us some ideas, and you can't use them. Yeah. Because they don't actually align with what you need to perform as a team. Yeah. So I think it's a little bit, you want player involvement or staff involvement, however you want to look at it, but it needs to be thought through properly, and you have to give them the time to genuinely discuss it, talk about it, throw the bad things away. Yeah. I think the worst thing that some people do is they go, right, we're going to involve you, go away, in 10 minutes time just come back with a few ideas. Because the ideas that come back will be either not worth looking at, or they'll almost cause you more problems, and you'll see things and you won't understand why they're there. And so that's what we tend to do. We tend to give them, if we're going to really create a brand new theme and not one that we can tack onto, because some really good themes you can tack another year onto and another year. You have a successful year. You know, there are themes that you can tack on, and what was the next stage of that theme? You know, a lot of themes have got, especially if they're involved in well-known things that people know, there's always been a follow-on story. You know, most teams that have won have had a follow-on story, whether they've dipped away and then won 2 years later or 3. So you can always tack something on. But when you are changing it a bit, I think that preparing to go week by week, little bits of involvement with the players before you come to the answer is probably the key. And that's probably why we're doing this pre-season. We don't need a big change, but we need it to be probably more player-driven than ever. And so actually, bit by bit, just talk to them about the key things that will align us as a team before we get to the start of the season. It's going to be key. We're going to do it a lot more gradually this season.
Amazing. Fascinating to hear about that sort of mentality that goes into it. I'm keen to get your opinion on something which is not necessarily associated just to the final loss from last year, and isn't necessarily related just to rugby, but the notion of the lesson learned out of a failure or a loss that we touched on earlier versus success. And is there a conscious practice or process that you can go through when you have a failure or a loss that you can learn from and take that forwards and move forward with? Is there something you do consciously in that process, or is it very much a case of a natural instinctive thing?
I've never sat down and gone, right, we need to completely break this down, we need to look at everything, because, as you say, I think for me the biggest thing, and I think the biggest thing that's probably given us a period of, if you say get into the amount of finals we have, is sustained success to a degree, which most people say it is.
Would you?
I think so. Yeah. I think anybody else in the Premiership would be, over the last 6-7 years would be envious of our record. So I would say that it's been pretty sustained, hasn't it? But what I would say within that is, however you want to try and break it down, however you want to try and analyse it, the key to that is probably being prepared to talk about the emotional side of it all. Yeah. And as I say, how you maintain emotional energy, where the emotion of the group is, how do we feel about losing a final? Because sometimes all of our finals that we've lost and won, they've all kind of happened for slightly different reasons. Yeah. It's never been that we've completely got it right after one and completely got it wrong leading into the other. It's never been, I've looked back and gone, we got everything wrong there. And I've never looked back after a win and gone, we got everything right. There's always been something that you tick on with. And you need to remember, with a group of players where their age range when they get to a final is probably somewhere around 21, and I think in our finals we've had some guys around 35, and they've played together. They've all had slightly different levels of experience. Some have played in finals, some not. We've had some guys now who've been involved in all of those finals that we've played in the last 6 years. Where they are and the mistakes they make now will all be influenced by little bits and little things that have changed along the way. So some finals we've lost, they've made us angry, and you can physically see it in the players. There's an anger and a hurt, but a knowing that we were probably good enough to win today, and we didn't quite perform. In our very first one, the feeling was, and they were very honest about to admit it, and we talked about it. We were just pleased to be there.
Yeah.
It was our first one. This club had never been to a final before. We were amazed we won a semi-final. We turned up at Twickenham. There's Exeter Chiefs supporters absolutely everywhere. They were singing, they were banging on the bus as we arrived. The atmosphere was amazing. And really, just being there, I remember players walking around Twickenham and looking around the grandstands. We were probably never going to win because it was amazing to be there.
Yeah.
And we never really settled in the game. And we probably did play quite well at the end of the game, but it was almost by the time the experience had worn off and we had a freedom to play. The next time we get there, a year later, that first feeling of it isn't just good enough to be here probably propelled us far enough to win. After that, for obvious reason, we came against a very good Saracens team, and they've kind of been our nemesis outside the Harlequins. And whatever reasons you want to put it, they've outplayed us in a couple. I think on one, we probably outplayed them and let ourselves down in a couple of moments. And that game, the one where we let ourselves down for just a few moments, probably was the deciding factor in us winning the double. Because I know for a fact the players came off from the pitch that day and said, we should have beaten the European champions. These guys have been the European champions the last couple of years. We should have beaten them. We've let ourselves down a bit today. I think today shows we are the team that can step forward and win the Premiership, win Europe. And it was a big driver for us in our attitude in the Premiership and the Heineken Cup that season. And the flip is now, and I think this is the key for ongoing success, is understanding when your biggest strengths become your biggest weaknesses. And I think what happened this season in particular was our biggest strength really did almost become our biggest weakness. So our biggest strength that we've been working so hard to kind of talk to players about and get them to understand is that we're a good team, we've got good processes, we've got good things in place, you're good players. What you need to do is make good decisions at the right time. So if you go behind in a game, as long as we're working hard, we're creating the intensity in the game we want, we've got things that will give us periods of the game where we can take charge and score points. So you don't need to, if we go 7 points down or 10 points down, you don't need to panic into getting your next thing wrong and your next thing wrong and your next thing wrong, which just allows the score to tumble down on you and you fall apart. And we learnt that, and you think how many games over the last 2 or 3 years when we've had success, we've won, we've gone points down, but we've kind of stuck at it longer than the opposition, and we've come through and won. I think the Toulouse semi-final here, we hardly saw the ball for 25 minutes. They go 6-0 up. We're probably a little fortunate not to concede a try, but we were following our game plan. And people look at me like I'm stupid. So like, can your game plan be to go points down? Well, the game plan wasn't to go points down. The game plan was to physically be as strong as we could and keep the game as high intensity as we could. So if we didn't kick the ball off the field, they might have attacked us multi-phase, but the big part was they're a big pack of forwards. You make your tackles, you put them on the floor. If we carry, you make them have to make sure they tackle you to the floor. We're going to make them scrummage in every scrum. We're going to make them have to work in every line out, because we think that 25, 30 minutes in, the tempo of the game will drop for them, but we can stick at it. So we didn't plan on going 6 points down, but what we did plan on doing was making them work very hard for it, and that's exactly what happened. And then all of a sudden we scored 2 tries just before half time, because they have their rest, bang, and that's. But the problem with that is it shows the real strength you can get from having that ability to stick at it and work hard. But if you take that too far, which I think we did a fair bit this season, what happens is you go out and instead of getting that real hard work done to create the damage, you start to feel your way in the game. And if the opposition score a couple of times, you look at each other and go, it's okay, we'll come back from this. Now, often you can, because you can decide to go, right, we'll up our tempo, and it works. And the big problem you get from it is you get a snowball effect of other things. So the end of the season, as an example, we went to Northampton and went 18-0 down, and we had a real challenge at half time. Just say, come on, no, we still need some points. We're still not guaranteed a home semi-final, and we had to kind of really shake ourselves up, work really hard for a second half. And great, we come back, everyone's really pleased. It feels great on the day, but you've got that inkling about, well, why did we do what we did in the first half? The week after, we did it in our last league game of the season against Sale, which meant they had the chance to take a home semi-final off us, They were coming out as hard as they could. We ended up scrambling around in defence, and we ended up with two guys one getting yellow carded, one getting red carded, who couldn't then play in the final.
Yeah.
But we lost them because we didn't play flat out. We didn't go, we're going to go flat out, we're going to challenge you in everything we do. It was a little bit like, we'll see what happens, and then we'll decide to go flat out if we need to.
Yeah.
Well, the damage was done by then. We won the game, we get the home semi-final. We were better in the semi-final at Sale, and I think we were better in the semi-final at Sale because we had to be.
Yeah.
Because we got annoyed with the red cards and the yellow cards and missing two of our players.
Yeah.
But we got to the final and we did exactly the same again.
Yeah.
We played hard when we had to. We got points up in the second half, and we just took our foot off the gas. Harlequins came back at us, and all of a sudden you look at the clock and it's 79 minutes, and they're in the lead, and the game's gone. And that's where your strength can become your weakness. And what you have to do is you have to be continually assessing. But the problem you've got is, from a coach perspective, sometimes you can't tell the players your strengths, your weakness until it is your weakness.
Yeah.
Because until we lost the final, we had always come back and we had always won the games and we had done it.
It worked, yeah.
And it worked. And yet that ability to not quite understand it until it slaps you in the face is a real challenge for a coach.
It strikes me that there's a level of transparency in conversation with your players that you work hard consciously to promote and to bring into the discussions that you're having. I'm guessing that's part of the plan, is to create a culture where people are comfortable addressing their weaknesses, where you're comfortable being vulnerable and addressing your weaknesses, and maybe where you get a plan wrong or a game plan wrong. And it feels like that's something that you've worked really hard to bring into the club generally.
The way I always kind of talk about it is, I kind of think if you're not prepared to be open and honest and emotional and make a bit of a fool, I think in a lot of ways, I think this is the breakdown in a lot of business, sport contests, is the guy at the front's is a bit embarrassed about making a fool of themselves. Well, the reality is, if you genuinely want to talk about emotion, you're going to look at a room, and some of them are going to look at you and go, "What is wrong with this bloke? I don't understand a word he's saying." Other guys will really buy into it, but you have to stick at it. And I think the only way I think is the best way to describe it is that I think you have to approach the group like you're quite, not I'm going to say happy to be disappointed, but you can be disappointed and you can deal with it, because that's what you have to do. You have to have the start point. Like, these are good guys. They want to be good men. They want to win games of rugby. So I take that as a start point. I can be quite open and honest with them. If they then let you down, at least they've let you down from the point where you've given them every chance to be as good as they can be. If you go in and you think, "Oh, these guys don't want to be any good. They don't want to try. They don't want to do it. Then you can never approach it from the maximum where you get the maximum results. And I always try and look at it the other way. Let's go at it like we can win everything. Are we open and honest about how we can do everything? This is my thoughts on it. You can jump on the train and we can buy into it together. We can be emotionally involved together. This is why I think you should. These are the benefits you can get from it." And then they either choose to align with it or not. And what will happen is, if you do a good enough job to give them the right reasons to align emotionally, physically, you can win things. And that's why I think my job is mainly about aligning them and but getting them to understand why. Why should I do what Rob says, or why should I do what Ali says, or why should I do what the coach says? What will I get out of it? What will be the benefits to me? Why will we benefit as a team? And if you can get that level of understanding across, you become quite strong. And I almost think, but again, that's where our strength became our weakness. So we've got that strength. I think our lads know how to play. They know how to win games of rugby for Exeter. And so you can have that a bit too much of a cushion eventually. Because actually, all those things are great, but you still have to go absolutely flat out in a final. You have to half kill yourself physically to win. And we didn't quite, and so we came a bit short. And so now, obviously our re-evaluation of where we are is not that we need to change the path we're on, but we need to work a bit harder on it. And that's it, really. And it's a simple answer, but it's the toughest one. The toughest one is always to get people to work harder, isn't it? Because human nature is, well, there's always a bit of an easier way to do stuff. You've got to give them a reason why, haven't you? And often, there isn't an easier way, and that's the success is not finding an easier way. The success, as I hear from some players, sometimes they come in and go, "Oh, we want to be challenged." They don't really mean they want to be challenged, because the challenge is, right, well, the challenge is you need to work a bit harder then. That's the challenge. So what they say is a challenge, I want variety. And variety is different. Variety is you just want to break. You want a bit of entertainment. You want to feel refreshed by something. That's actually not the challenge. The challenge is understanding that sometimes you have to work harder at something. You have to improve at something, and that will be that's your next step.
When we look at the club, and we've talked about sustained success, 6 finals in a row. There isn't another club out there that's achieved anything close to that, really, and that's not by accident. One of the things I hear time and time again is the recruitment strategy, that it's not just about the best rugby players, it's about bringing people in who buy into the club, buy into the mentality of the team and the people within the team. And that people component keeps coming up whenever I hear you talk, actually. What is it that you look for in somebody to come and join the team outside of rugby capability or skills? What are the things that rule somebody in or indeed quickly rule them out?
See, this is an interesting one because I get asked this question a lot. I suppose a little bit like you said, because people talk about a lot about the guys who are here. Obviously we have an interview process before we have recruit somebody, but it isn't the single biggest factor. I'm actually quite comfortable with them being all different. Every interview we do seeming a bit weird. If they can't communicate that well, it's not the end of the world. If they come across a bit odd, it's not the end of the world. Because I like to think that most of the qualities we're looking for in people, I can see when I watch them play, and it's funny how often they will align. So if it's weird that you will watch a game, and obviously we spend a lot of detail on watching our players who are potentially coming, and some of those things, like I talk about, some of those intangibles about how a player is emotionally in the game. Once you've been doing it a long time, you can kind of pick up the clues about whether they're actually caring about what they do. And I think that is one part of it. And then the second part of the interview process that I find very simple is if I've watched enough of their games and I know what their strengths and weaknesses are, I have a massive expectation that they'll know what they are. Because to me, that's the key about someone who can be coached. Because if I sit and I ask them their strengths and weaknesses, some guys don't quite know what to do. Obviously, nobody really wants to say they've got a weakness or they've got. But if a guy genuinely doesn't really know his strengths and weaknesses, then how do you really coach them? How do you, if they can't see it in themselves, it's very, very hard for you as a coach to show it to them. If they've got as long as they've got an inkling of it or an understanding of it or a degree of expectation that that's the kind of question they're going to ask, I can feel somebody I can work with. When somebody just can't see it, if I say something, they literally look at me and they just say, "I can't see that." No, I have a bit of a worry, and that's not me telling them that they should just necessarily believe what I say. But I won't ever ask a question that I would expect them to not know the answer to. And I think that's the key for me. I say to our coaches all the time, I think even now, even in all the modern technology, the key to being a good coach is to believe what you see with your own eyes and not find loads of reasons to not believe it. If you see it and you like it, there's probably a reason. If you're a decent coach, you've put the hours in, you've looked at you've spent enough time on looking at what success looks like and what failure looks like, what good practice looks like. You should be able to see it, and you could. I'm not saying sense it because you need to look at it in detail, but you should start to know and believe with your own eyes. And that's when you've got to be careful you don't let someone else tell you something that you're not seeing, or try and prove to you you're seeing something you're not seeing. That's the old Emperor's New Clothes stuff. Someone could tell your player's the greatest player in the world, and whatever their stats say, they could look the greatest player in the world. But if you're watching it and go, I just don't see it.
Feel right,
For me, that's the key. And it's funny how often that's translated into people who are here and work really well in our environment because it looks to me like they'll fit in. There's a blueprint I've seen in enough players now to go, this guy, I can see him fitting in.
It's interesting that you brought it back to honesty, self-awareness again.
Yes.
Last question for me. Everybody has a component of their role that's tougher, harder, less enjoyable. And certainly as a leader, we get the plaudits of when things go well, but we also have to hit head on when things don't go so well. And that can be really tough. And I think people forget that about leadership and that sometimes the worst stuff comes directly to you. Are there parts of the role that stand out for you as being the bits that you do find harder, that you have to battle through or grit your teeth as you go to do it, rather than the glory moments and the things that you obviously enjoy?
I think probably it links back to what you were saying about sustained success as well, in that it's making the tough decisions that are probably emotionally challenging. They're the ones. So for me, I think making tough decisions based around players and staff when they're clearly easy decisions, so based around poor behaviour, poor performance, whatever, that's relatively easy. But as particularly with players, you can imagine I've been the director of rugby head coach 10 years and been involved before then. So pretty much every player who leaves, I have to sit them down at some stage and say, you're not getting a contract, it's the end of your time here. And for me, that's not a nice experience, not a nice, you can't, there's no way you can dress it up and say that's an enjoyable thing to do. I think the only way I can dress up to do for myself is go, it's actually one of the most important things in the job when you're talking about, like you were saying, sustained success, because you can't do it by just keeping everyone happy.
No.
You can't just offer great players who've been really good another contract just because they were good before. And you know, sitting down with someone who you ask right at the start of their career with you, and you say, I think you'd be a great player for us. You buy into what we do emotionally. You buy into it with the rest of the guys. You've got the opportunity to play a lot of good rugby here. And some of those guys have played in winning cups for us. You know, right back to winning our first trophy, winning premierships, getting us in the Premiership, winning our first trophies, keeping us in the Premiership, winning our first Premiership, winning your. You know, those guys have all been part of it, and at some stage, either now they may choose to leave, which I actually quite like. People are surprised by this. They kind of go, "Oh, well, it mustn't be so happy with so and so leaving." I go, "I'm really pleased they've left because at some stage it means I don't have to tell them they're going." You know, I like players who kind of they move on for the right reasons, and I have no problem when guys move on because they can have more money somewhere else or whatever. That to me feels like success. But those ones where you go, the ones where you go, like, we can't offer you a contract anymore, and I know they want to stay, and I know they would accept another contract, and that's tough. It's tough if they're good guys and they bought in and they've helped you with success, because it feels like that. What do they call it? That kind of. Well, you know, they say there's no sentiment in sport. I mean, I actually don't believe that, because the way I look at professional sport is that if you're a player. You're here, you do the best for this team. And I'm not talking about Exeter Rugby Club. When you're here, you do the best for this team. As your coach, I do the best for you while you're here. If we both do a good job, we'll give each other a degree of success. And that's all we can do. We can't be any more than that and say we're looking after each other's. When they say there's no loyalty, that is loyalty. If I'm helping you be the best player you can be, you might get a good career at Exeter, but someone else will also be prepared to recruit you or even offer you more money. And if you do a good job while you're here, the team has the chance of success. I have the chance to be a successful head coach or director of rugby. That's loyalty. And we talk to our players about that all the time. You know, I've never said to any of them, I expect you to play for Exeter Chiefs. I expect you to play for this rugby club. You know, they come from all over the world. Half our academy comes from Cornwall. You know, we're their local club because we've ended up working and we got in the Premiership. So it's not necessarily having a loyalty, but they should have a loyalty to the team and a loyalty to each other. And that's all we can expect. And then at some stage, the time is right, and that's not the very nice part of the job.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you have a responsibility to make a decision that's right for the entire club,
That's right.
and not just for that individual player. And sometimes that means people lose for the greater good.
That's right.
Rob, thank you. It's been fascinating listening to you. I could listen to you all day long. I think you've got some.
I could talk all day.
Really
That's the problem.
There's a win-win. Let's put it that way. Really enjoyed meeting you. Thank you ever so much for joining us and for giving us your thoughts today.
No problem. Thank you very much.